Hello subscribers and non-subscribers, welcome to Armored Warfare, the first of, can't really say many episodes, but probably a good chunk. I don't quite expect this to become like a regular series of any sort that gets uploaded on Monday, but it will end up being uploaded every so often. One thing I want to note real quick before we actually really get into this, because matches are relatively short in this game, the shortest that I have off the top of my head that I managed to survive from beginning to end was, I think, about 5 minutes. So, yeah. They're relatively short matches at times. They're not like War Thunder matches that go on for potentially 20 plus minutes. And for the sake of providing a very basic idea of how this game plays, it is essentially at its base World of Tanks with a modern setting. And I haven't played too much of the game to really go into any detail as to like what's different. And granted, I haven't played World of Tanks in probably like 4 years, so that definitely doesn't help either. But nonetheless, again, this game at its base is pretty much World of Tanks with a modern day setting. Now, I will say, if I do have one problem with this game, is that the optimization right now is pretty freaking bad. I'll put up something on screen right about here that has the recommended system specs that they put up there. First thing I want to note is that the graphics card they recommend is a GTX 275, I believe it was. Let me pull the thing up again on my end. Yes, that is the recommended NVIDIA graphics card. And then it just says or equivalent, so yeah, you got to figure that out for yourself when it comes to AMD. But considering that the 275 is presumably a fairly old card, since it's 2 and NVIDIA is currently at 9, yeah, fairly old card, and I struggle to maintain a steady 30 FPS. Well, I was, especially when I tried to record with DxTory. I've actually had to switch my recording out for this game over to AMD Gaming Evolve's Raptor game DVR, whatever it is that they call it. And that works a bit better at helping me to maintain FPS, but I still don't really maintain a steady 30. But I do still manage to do better nonetheless. So yeah, one thing I would like to see is just a little bit of optimization done earlier on. I know for the most part it's one of the last steps, but still, I would like to see a little bit more of it done in the early phases to help out a bit. Because I hear people complaining, even with relatively high-end systems, struggling to have a higher FPS. So it helps, just a little bit. You don't need to go overboard, but just a bit. But yeah, so at least what I played this game was actually pretty decent. I do have again, my only real issue is just that the optimization is not the greatest. But that, of course, will change over time, like always, when it comes to these games. And I do want to note real quick, I'm not a big fan of the M113, although that's not currently what we are driving. Actually, in this battle here, we're driving out the PT-76, which is essentially the starter vehicle for the group that I guess is essentially based out of Russia, that you buy your weapons from, or your vehicles from. That one's basically based out of Russia. For the most part, their weapons are obviously going to be Eastern European weapons, primarily Russian, I'd imagine, actually, but nonetheless. And then you got one that's based out of the US, more or less. They start out with the M113, which I'm not a fan of personally. And you'll see it in the next match. Now, granted, when you see the next match is actually a pretty good match with it. I just got lucky, I think, in that one. But usually, I don't do so great with the M113. And I don't even, like, charge out there thinking that I'm going to manage to take on, like, a T-62 or something with that vehicle. I don't do that. But I still don't manage to really be at all, or all that successful with it, except for the match that you see, essentially part 2 of this video, because I had to bring 2 different matches into this, because as I said, they are relatively short matches. I mean, this one's only like just shy of 8 minutes, I think. And I figured I might as well go ahead and add in the other one. But one thing that does annoy me actually is that the servers themselves are not always up. They are only up during certain times. So, yeah. For North America, during the weekdays, they are up from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And on the weekends, for North America, they are up from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern Time. Oh, I think the reason... Well, no, I don't think that's the case, because for EU it tells me CEST, which I think is Central European Standard Time. But yeah, so for Europe, it's 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the weekdays. Again, CEST, which I think is Central European Standard Time, but I honestly don't care because it doesn't really matter to me. And the weekends is 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So yeah, the servers themselves are not always up, which I'm not a fan of, because I think that kind of will screw some people up in regards to when they can really do anything. Granted, the times they've selected, I think, are for the most part times where people will be fine, but I still don't think it's necessarily the greatest. I think you'd be better off just essentially having them up 24/7 between certain times of the month, essentially. You could set it up to where you've got, say, a week and a half where the servers are up 24/7, and then they're down for like half a week or something, and then they're back up for another week and a half, and then they're back down for like half a week or something like that. Pretty much, essentially, that's what ArcAge kind of did, was essentially have the servers up 24/7, except they were only accessible during certain times of the week. And I think that worked out pretty well in that regard. Although that game did kind of, I think, disappear off the radar for the most part. But yeah, so here's the M113. This is one of the maps they have. So they've got a pretty decent variety of maps. They've got one that's like a train yard in the middle of a desert. You've got this one here, which is an urban map during winter somewhere, I'm presuming, because of all the snow. Of course, I don't really know where this map is meant to be essentially based out of realistically when it comes to the geography, so if I knew that, that would definitely help in really figuring out certain things. But nonetheless, the general idea is that, yeah, this is an urban map essentially in winter, more or less. You've got, again, as I said, one that's in a train yard in the middle of a desert. You've got one that is swampy, and I think there actually is rain on that swampy one. So yeah, and then you've got the one that we were just on, which is essentially an urban map, more or less. Though it's not as urban as this one, where, like, in this case, basically half the map is urban. The other one, we didn't have that much of the map really being urban. It was really just the center of the map for the most part. But yeah, so they've got a decent variety of maps. I think they've only got 4 right now. But again, they've got some variety in them. They're not like all just copy-paste of the same map with slight changes to them. But yeah, so I'm gonna go and actually, I think, cut this off right about here, and that's really all I can do. I can't say I've really had any bugs, although I did have a number of crashes, but I think that was primarily caused by Crossfire, which I have since turned off for this game at least. I've told it to disable itself when I play Armored Warfare. That should help in removing crashes for me for the most part. Because as I said, I think crashes for the most part were caused by Crossfire, and the 2 matches that I played, which are these, I did not have a single crash. So yeah, there we go. I'm assuming that was the cause. Was that Crossfire was causing issues with the game, and it has now been fixed by turning it off when I play this game. So yeah, that's actually really all I have to say, and I will say this, I'm kind of surprised that my ping was as high as it was at times, hanging out at almost 100. I am playing on the North American server, so kind of surprised by that. Usually when I play on North American servers and US servers, my ping tends to stay well below 100 a lot of the time. But then again, I usually have a lot more control over what server I'm on. I'm usually able to say, oh, I only want servers on the East Coast or things like that. But in this case, you just say, I want a match, and it throws you into a match. And I selected the US server at the when I launched the game, and so I get the US server, which is fine with me because I live in the US. Or, well, the North American server, which is fine with me because I live in the US, which is in North America. But yeah, nonetheless, I'm kind of surprised that my ping was as high as it was. I will say this though, I did have one thing that I think is a bug, but it may have been caused by Crossfire yet again. But when I play the game on the lowest possible settings, I actually get a lot of flickering on the buildings and rocks. Now it's not flickering that like allows me to see through them, it's just the rocks themselves flicker. It's like the textures on them are having issues of some kind. But again, I think that might have been fixed by Crossfire. I'll have to check and make sure the next time that I'm able to play the game, which will not be today, more than likely. Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do that today. But as I said, I'll have to check that out and see. And if the rocks no longer flicker when I am playing on low, I will probably switch to low so I can hopefully maintain above 30 FPS pretty much solid. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here because this is pretty much the end of the video. More or less, just a couple more seconds. But like I said, I'm going to cut it off. So, as always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.